original narrated audio story by Forbidden Romance Stories. Duke Matthias of Brenly stood at the window of Thornwick Manor, his knuckles white against the stone ledge, as rain lashed the gardens, where his daughter played alone. 3 years had passed since the Duchess's death, yet the hollowness in his chest remained unfilled, a wound that refused to heal beneath his immaculate attire. Across the sodden lawn, a young woman with auburn hair knelt beside little Cordelia, gently repairing a broken doll, with nimble fingers that belied her servant's status. Something in Linnea's patient smile made the Duke turn away sharply, his breath, catching as unwelcome warmth, threatened the ice he had so carefully cultivated around his heart. He had sworn never to love again, a vow now challenged by a simple maiden whose kindness was awakening not only his silent daughter, but the man he thought had died alongside his wife. Duke Matthias of Brenly moved through the grand corridors of Thornwick Manor, like a ghost haunting his own home. The morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the emptiness where laughter once echoed. 3 years had passed since Duchess Octavia had drawn her final breath, yet her absence remained as raw as the day she departed. "Your Grace," his steward Mr. Finley approached with a bow. "Lady Cordelia's new governess has submitted her resignation." Matthias sighed, unsurprised. "How long did this one last?" "A fortnight. 3 weeks, Your Grace." "She claims the child is." Finley hesitated, unresponsive to instruction. "Find another." Matthias waved his hand dismissively. "Someone with patience this time." "This marks the 5th governess this year, Your Grace. Perhaps if you were to speak with Lady Cordelia." "That will be all, Finley." The steward bowed again and retreated, leaving Matthias alone with thoughts he preferred to avoid. He moved to the window overlooking the eastern garden, where a small figure sat motionless on a stone bench, a porcelain doll clutched in her tiny hands. 6-year-old Lady Cordelia, with her mother's golden curls and his own gray eyes, had become as silent as the portraits that lined the gallery walls. The vibrant child who once filled Thornwick with song had vanished the day her mother died, replaced by a solemn ghost who spoke only when necessary and smiled never. Matthias pressed his forehead against the cool glass. He had failed Octavia by failing their daughter, yet each time he looked at Cordelia, he saw only his wife, the same delicate features, the same graceful movements. The resemblance was a dagger to his heart, twisting deeper with each passing day. The Duke retreated to his study, where a stack of correspondence awaited his attention. Marriage proposals disguised as social invitations, matchmaking matrons offering their daughters and nieces, all hoping to claim the title of Duchess of Brenly. He swept them into the fire without reading beyond the first lines. "Never again," he whispered to the flames consuming the parchment. It was a vow he had made at Octavia's graveside, kneeling in the rain while Cordelia's small hand trembled in his. Love had destroyed him once. He would not grant it another opportunity. Thornwick Manor had once been the jewel of Brenly, hosting lavish balls and gatherings that brought nobility from across the kingdom. Now it stood in dignified decay, its halls emptied of guests, its ballroom closed, its gardens tended only by necessity rather than pride. The staff whispered when they thought he couldn't hear, pitying the widowed Duke and his silent daughter. They spoke of the curse of Thornwick, how happiness seemed to flee from its stone walls, leaving only duty and obligation behind. As dusk fell, Matthias made his way to the nursery for his nightly ritual. He paused outside the door, listening to the silence within. No laughter, no bedtime stories, no childish prayers. With a steadying breath, he entered. Cordelia sat at her window seat, nightgown pristine, hair neatly braided by her lady's maid. She turned as he entered, her face composed in the perfect mask of nobility. He had never wanted her to learn so young. "Good evening, Father," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Good evening, Cordelia." He crossed to her and placed a formal kiss on her forehead. "I understand your governess has left us." A flicker of something, relief, perhaps, crossed her features before the mask returned. "Yes, Father. We shall find another. Your education cannot be neglected." "Yes, Father." The conversation, stilted and formal, continued as it always did. He inquired about her studies. She responded with polite brevity. Neither mentioned the resignation. the fifth in a succession of women who found themselves unable to reach the withdrawn child. When he bid her good night, Matthias lingered at the door, watching as she climbed into her bed without assistance, arranging her doll beside her with careful precision. The doll, Octavia's gift on her 3rd birthday, was Cordelia's constant companion, the only thing to which she showed any attachment. "Sleep well, Cordelia," he said. "Good night, Father," she replied, her eyes already closing, shutting out the world as effectively as he had. Back in his chambers, Matthias dismissed his valet and stood alone before the portrait of Octavia that hung above his fireplace. Her eyes seemed to follow him, questioning, perhaps accusing. "I cannot do this without you," he whispered to the painting. "She needs a mother's touch, not my broken heart." Yet the thought of another woman taking Octavia's place, in Thornwick, in Cordelia's life, in his bed, filled him with cold revulsion. No, there would be no new Duchess of Brenly. He would raise his daughter alone, protect her from the pain of attachment, teach her that duty and honor were safer companions than love. Finley would begin the search for another governess, another stranger who would fail to reach Cordelia before inevitably departing. The cycle would continue, reinforcing the walls around both their hearts. Matthias extinguished the candle beside his bed, surrendering to darkness and the solitude he had chosen. In the shadows, he renewed his vow, never to love again. Linnea Thorne pulled her worn cloak tighter as she approached the imposing gates of Thornwick Manor. The spring morning was crisp, dew still clinging to the grass alongside the gravel path that led to the ducal residence. Behind her lay Marilow village and the simple life she had known as a clothmaker's daughter. Ahead loomed uncertainty. She hoped opportunity. Her father's passing had left her with little choice but to seek employment. The small cottage they had shared, filled with looms and the scent of dyed wool, could no longer be maintained on what little savings remained. When news reached Marilow that Thornwick Manor sought new staff, Linnea had gathered her meager possessions and set forth with determination, if not confidence. The manor itself was even more magnificent than rumors suggested, a sprawling stone edifice, with turrets and ivy-covered walls that spoke of centuries of nobility. Linnea felt suddenly small, her homespun dress and practical boots marking her as distinctly out of place. "You there? Are you the new laundry girl?" A stout woman with keys jangling at her waist approached from the servants' entrance. "I've come seeking work, ma'am," Linnea replied with a curtsy. "I'm Linnea Thorne from Marilow." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, looked her up and down with assessing eyes. "We need someone in the laundry. Can you handle a hot iron without burning linens?" Linnea nodded, though her skills extended far beyond laundry. In Marilow, she had been known for her delicate embroidery and precise stitching, her ability to transform simple cloth into items of beauty. But beggars could not be choosers, and the laundry would provide a roof and meals. "Follow me, then. You'll be given a uniform and shown to the servants' quarters. Mind you keep to yourself and do your work without complaint." As Mrs. Winters led her through the servants' corridors, Linnea caught glimpses of the manor's grandeur: polished wood, gleaming silver, tapestries that told stories of battles and romances long past. She also noted the silence, unusual for such a large house. There was no music, no laughter, only the hushed efficiency of servants moving like shadows. "The Duke prefers quiet," Mrs. Winters explained, noticing Linnea's observation. "Since the Duchess passed, Thornwick observes a certain decorum." "I understand," Linnea said softly. "I lost my father recently." Something in Mrs. Winters' stern expression softened momentarily. "Then you'll fit well enough. Just remember your place and keep to it." By midday, Linnea was dressed in the plain gray dress of a laundry maid, her auburn hair tucked neatly beneath a cap, her hands already reddening from hot water and lye soap. The work was hard but straightforward, and she found a rhythm in the washing, wringing, and hanging of the endless linens. It was while hanging sheets in the drying yard that Linnea first saw them. The Duke and his daughter, walking in the formal garden, at a careful distance from one another. Even from afar, their isolation was palpable. Two islands separated by an invisible sea. "That's His Grace and Lady Cordelia," whispered Agnes, another laundry maid. They take their constitutional at precisely 2 o'clock each day, weather permitting. Never seen such a solemn child in all my days. Linnea watched as the little girl walked 3 steps behind her father, her posture perfect, her face expressionless. The Duke himself moved with rigid dignity, his handsome features set in stone, his black attire marking a mourning that seemed to have no end. "Poor lamb," Linnea murmured, her heart aching for the child. "Mind your task." Mrs. Winters appeared suddenly. "The Duke's family is not for servants to gawk at or gossip over." Linnea returned to her work, but found her thoughts returning to the solemn pair throughout the day. That evening in the servants' hall, she learned more from the whispered conversations around her. How the Duchess had died of fever 3 years past, how the Duke had closed himself off from society, how young Lady Cordelia had stopped speaking save for the barest necessities. 5 governesses this year alone, the cook's assistant confided. The child drives them to distraction with her silence, and His Grace offers no assistance. They say he's sworn never to remarry, added a footman. Though half the eligible ladies in the kingdom would have him. Linnea listened without comment, her natural warmth and empathy stirring, despite the warnings to keep to herself. As she lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the breathing of 3 other maids in the small chamber, she thought of her own father, how he had retreated into silence after her mother's death, and how she had slowly, patiently drawn him back to life with simple kindness. Perhaps, she thought as sleep claimed her, there was more than one kind of mending she might do at Thornwick Manor. 3 weeks into her employment at Thornwick, Linnea had established herself as a diligent worker. Her hands, once known for crafting delicate embroidery, now expertly managed the heavy irons and folding of the duchy's finest linens. She kept to herself as instructed, though her natural warmth occasionally broke through in small kindnesses. A cup of tea for an ailing scullery maid, assistance, with heavy loads, for the elderly gardener. On a mild afternoon, Mrs. Winters assigned Linnea to air out the rarely used east wing tapestries. Arms full of lavender sachets, she made her way through the garden shortcut, enjoying a rare moment of solitude away from the steamy laundry rooms. A small sound, something between a gasp and a sob, stopped her. Behind a hedge of trim boxwood, Lady Cordelia knelt on the gravel path, her face a mask of silent distress as she clutched something to her chest. Propriety demanded that Linnea continue on her way, pretending not to notice the Duke's daughter. Yet something in the child's posture, the rigid control even in her moment of private grief, moved Linnea to approach. "My lady," she said gently, kneeling to the girl's level. "Are you hurt?" Cordelia's head snapped up, gray eyes wide with alarm. She clutched the object tighter, shaking her head in rigid denial. "I'm Linnea from the laundry," she continued softly. "Perhaps I can help?" After a moment's hesitation, Cordelia slowly revealed what she held. A porcelain doll with an elaborate gown, its head now separated from its body, fine cracks spiderwebbing across the delicate face. "Oh, I see," Linnea nodded with understanding. "A terrible accident for your friend." Cordelia's eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. Linnea recognized the doll as the one the child carried everywhere, reportedly a gift from her late mother. "May I?" Linnea held out her hands, and after a moment's hesitation, Cordelia surrendered the broken pieces. Examining the damage, Linnea smiled reassuringly. "This can be mended. The cracks are clean, and the porcelain is still sound." She looked directly into the girl's eyes. "Would you like me to repair her for you?" A barely perceptible nod was her only answer. "I'll need some special materials. Would you come with me to fetch them? It wouldn't be proper for your doll to be without her lady, even for mending." To her surprise, Cordelia stood and placed her small hand in Linnea's outstretched one. Together they walked to the servants' quarters, where Linnea retrieved a small sewing kit that contained not only thread and needles, but also a tiny pot of porcelain glue, a remnant from her father's workshop, where she had learned to repair fine buttons and ornaments. In a quiet corner of the garden, Linnea worked carefully, explaining each step to Cordelia in a gentle, matter-of-fact voice. She cleaned the broken edges, applied the glue with precision, and held the pieces together until the bond began to set. "My father taught me this," she said as they waited. "He made the finest cloth in Marillo. but he also knew how to fix precious things when they broke. He said everything deserves a second chance at wholeness. As she spoke, she used fine thread to secure the doll's head to its body, creating an invisible support beneath the lace collar. Finally, she touched up the cracks with a bit of paint from her kit, making them nearly invisible. "There," she said, presenting the repaired doll to Cordelia. "She'll need to rest quietly until tomorrow for the glue to fully harden, but she'll be good as new." Cordelia took the doll, examining it with careful fingers. Then, in a voice so soft Linnea almost missed it, she whispered, "Thank you." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet monumental. Linnea smiled, careful not to show her astonishment. "You're very welcome, my lady." "Her name is Octavia," Cordelia added, the words coming slowly, as if remembered from a distant dream. "Like my mother." "She's beautiful, Lady Cordelia," Linnea replied, her heart aching with tenderness, "and very brave to sit so still for her repairs." A ghost of a smile touched Cordelia's lips before she clutched the doll to her chest once more. By evening, word had spread through the servants' quarters. Lady Cordelia had spoken, actual sentences, to the new laundry maid. Mrs. Winters interrogated Linnea thoroughly, her expression oscillating between suspicion and wonder. "I only fixed her doll, ma'am," Linnea explained. "Well," the housekeeper said finally, "His Grace will certainly hear of this. Mind you don't get above yourself, girl. The child hasn't spoken more than yes or no for nearly 3 years." Linnea fell asleep, wondering if the Duke of Brenly might also benefit from someone who believed in second chances at wholeness. Duke Matthias stood motionless behind the library curtains, his presence concealed as he observed the scene unfolding in the garden below. For the third consecutive day, his daughter sat beside the laundry maid on a stone bench near the fountain. The girl, Linnea Thorne, he had learned, was gently brushing Cordelia's golden curls, her movements careful and unhurried. More remarkable than this unexpected tableau was the sound that occasionally drifted through the open window. Cordelia's voice, soft but unmistakable, responding to the maid's gentle questions. "Who authorized this arrangement?" he had demanded when Finley first reported the development. "Mrs. Winters, Your Grace." After the incident with the doll, she thought perhaps Lady Cordelia might benefit from Miss Thorne's company during afternoon hours. Matthias had been prepared to end the improper association immediately. But something stopped him. Perhaps the mention that his daughter had spoken, truly spoken, for the first time in years. "I will observe before making a decision," he had said instead. Now, watching from above, he studied the laundry maid with critical eyes. She was young, perhaps 20, with auburn hair partially visible beneath her cap. Her movements possessed a natural grace that belied her station. And when she smiled at something, Cordelia said, her entire face transformed with a warmth that struck him like a physical blow. It reminded him, painfully, of Octavia. As if sensing his scrutiny, Linnea glanced toward the library window. Matthias stepped back, though he knew he couldn't be seen through the heavy drapes. Still, something in her gaze, direct and unafraid, suggested she was aware of being watched. He retreated to his desk, unsettled by emotions he had long suppressed. Jealousy that this servant had accomplished what he could not, drawing Cordelia out of her silence. Anger at the impropriety of their growing attachment. Relief that his daughter showed signs of returning to the living. And beneath it all, an unwelcome stirring of interest in the maid herself. "Your Grace," Finley interrupted his thoughts. "Lady Henrietta's carriage has been sighted on the main road. She will arrive within the hour." Matthias nodded, grateful for the distraction. Lady Henrietta Dorcel was the daughter of the Earl of Westmoreland, a suitable match by any standard. Her visit, arranged by his aunt, was clearly intended as a preliminary step toward courtship, a prospect he had resisted, but could not indefinitely avoid. The duchy required an heir beyond Cordelia, and his council had made their expectations increasingly clear. "Prepare the blue salon," he instructed, "and inform Lady Cordelia she will be expected to greet our guest." When Finley departed, Matthias found himself drawn back to the window. Linnea was now reading from a small book while Cordelia leaned against her side, face animated in a way he had not seen since Octavia's death. The sight pierced him with longing for what had been lost. Later that afternoon, as he escorted Lady Henrietta through the portrait gallery, Matthias found his attention wandering. The lady was everything society deemed desirable, beautiful, accomplished, impeccably bred. She spoke knowledgeably about art and literature, her manners beyond reproach. Yet he felt nothing as she placed her gloved hand on his arm, nothing as she laughed melodiously at his distracted attempts at conversation. "Your daughter is charming," Lady Henrietta remarked as Cordelia was led away by her maid after the briefest of introductions. "Though perhaps a bit reserved for her age. She has suffered a great loss," Matthias replied stiffly. "Of course. Children are resilient, however. A mother's influence would surely help her overcome such melancholy tendencies." The presumption irritated him, though he knew it was merely a conventional sentiment. Before he could formulate a polite response, movement in the garden caught his eye. Linnea had returned to her duties, carrying a basket of linens across the lawn. The sunlight caught her hair as her cap slipped slightly, revealing a burnished copper that glowed like fire. "Your Grace?" Lady Henrietta prompted, noticing his distraction. "Forgive me," he said, turning back to his guest with effort. "You were saying," as the lady resumed her gentle probing about his interests and estate. Matthias realized with alarm that for the first time in 3 years, he was thinking of a woman other than Octavia, a woman whose station made her as forbidden to him as the stars. In the garden, Linnea paused, looking up at the gallery windows as if she could feel his gaze upon her. With a small private smile, she continued on her way. The Duchess of Brenly's private sitting room had remained sealed since Octavia's death, preserved like a mausoleum to her memory. Now, as Matthias unlocked the door for the first time in 3 years, dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the corridor. He stepped inside, overcome by the lingering scent of lavender and beeswax that had been Octavia's signature. "Your Grace," Lord Pembroke, his most trusted advisor, followed him into the room. "I must press you again on the matter of remarriage. The duchy requires stability, an heir. Lady Henrietta's family has made their expectations clear." Matthias ran his fingers along the spines of Octavia's books, remembering how she would read aloud in this very room, Cordelia at her feet, both of them laughing at funny passages. "And what of my daughter's expectations?" he asked quietly. "She has only recently begun to speak again." "Indeed, which brings me to another matter." Pembroke cleared his throat. "This attachment to the laundry maid is causing talk below stairs. It isn't appropriate for Lady Cordelia to form such a connection with a servant." Matthias had anticipated this objection. The past fortnight had seen a remarkable transformation in Cordelia, smiles, conversation, even laughter, occasionally echoing through previously silent corridors, all because of Linnea Thorne. "I have made a decision about that," he said. "Miss Thorne will be reassigned as Cordelia's companion. Her education appears sufficient for basic instruction, and my daughter responds to her." Pembroke's eyebrows rose in alarm. "A laundry maid as companion to the heir of Brenly? Your Grace, consider the implications. Lady Henrietta has already commented on the unusual familiarity between them." "Has she?" Matthias felt a flare of irritation. "Lady Henrietta has been in residence barely a week. She presumes much." The truth was more complex than he cared to admit. Lady Henrietta's presence was a constant reminder of what society expected: a suitable marriage, more children, the continuation of his line. Yet he found himself inventing excuses to avoid her company, while seeking opportunities to observe Linnea with Cordelia. "The girl is from Marillo village," Pembroke continued, "a clothmaker's daughter. She cannot possibly understand the requirements of nobility." "Yet she understands my daughter," Matthias countered. "Something 5 governesses from the finest families failed to accomplish." Later that day, Matthias summoned Linnea to his study, maintaining a formal distance behind his desk as she entered with downcast eyes and a perfect curtsy. "Miss Thorne," he began, noting the slight tremor in her hands, "I understand you have formed a connection with Lady Cordelia." "Yes, Your Grace." Her voice was soft but steady. "She is a remarkable child. Indeed." He studied her. This woman who had breached the walls his daughter had built. "I am reassigning you from the laundry to be Lady Cordelia's companion. You will oversee her daily activities and continue her basic education until a suitable governess can be engaged. Linnea's head lifted, her eyes, a startling shade of amber, meeting his directly. Your Grace honors me beyond my station. It is not an honor but a necessity, he corrected, unsettled by her gaze. My daughter's welfare is my primary concern. As it should be, she replied with unexpected boldness. Lady Cordelia deserves every happiness. Something in her tone suggested a gentle rebuke, as if she questioned whether he had previously prioritized his daughter's happiness. The impertinence should have angered him, yet he found himself respecting her courage. Mrs. Winters will show you to new quarters adjacent to the nursery. You will begin tomorrow. As she turned to leave, Matthias added, Miss Thorne, remember that while your position has changed, the distance between our worlds remains. Lady Cordelia must understand her place in society, as must you. Linnea paused at the door, her profile illuminated by the afternoon sun. Some distances, Your Grace, exist only because we choose to maintain them. With another perfect curtsy, she was gone, leaving Matthias with the uncomfortable sensation that in their brief exchange, it was the laundry maid who had maintained her dignity, while he had revealed his fear. The first snow of winter fell on Thornwick Manor like a shroud, transforming the grounds into a silent wonderland that delighted Cordelia. Under Linnea's watchful eye, the child ventured into the gardens, her laughter, a sound once foreign to the estate, echoing off stone walls as she caught snowflakes on her tongue. Matthias watched from his study, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. In the 3 months since Linnea's appointment as Cordelia's companion, his daughter had blossomed, her lessons progressed well, her nightmares had subsided, and the haunted look had vanished from her eyes. Lady Henrietta had departed weeks ago, her expectations of courtship unfulfilled. The council grumbled, but Matthias found he could not bring himself to care. For the first time since Octavia's death, Thornwick felt less like a mausoleum and more like a home. The change was entirely due to Linnea Thorne, whose quiet competence had gradually extended beyond Cordelia to influence the entire household. Fresh flowers appeared in forgotten corners. Music occasionally drifted from the long-closed music room, and even the servants moved with lighter steps. Matthias found himself inventing reasons to observe their lessons or join their walks. Drawn by Linnea's gentle wisdom and unaffected manner, she treated him not as the fearsome duke, but simply as Cordelia's father, a man doing his best in impossible circumstances. It was during one such walk, as the three of them examined animal tracks in the snow, that Cordelia first complained of feeling unwell. My head hurts, she said, her cheeks unusually flushed, and I'm cold, even with my cloak. Linnea's hand went immediately to the child's forehead. She's burning with fever, Your Grace, she said, alarm evident in her voice. We must get her inside at once. By nightfall, Cordelia lay in her bed, her small body racked with chills despite the roaring fire and piled blankets. The physician from the village, summoned immediately, looked grave as he examined her. Winter fever, he pronounced. It has been moving through the surrounding villages with particular virulence this season. Matthias felt the blood drain from his face. Winter fever, the same illness that had claimed Octavia. Will she? He could not finish the question. I have given her what medicines I can, the physician said carefully. Send for the royal physician in Valminster. I fear this is beyond my skill. The next days passed in a blur of mounting terror. The royal physician arrived with his assistants, bringing potions and powders that seemed to offer no relief. Cordelia's fever rose relentlessly, her breathing becoming labored, her periods of consciousness briefer and more confused. Your Grace, the royal physician said on the third night, his voice low as they stood outside the sick room. I must prepare you. Many children have succumbed to this fever this season. Her constitution is delicate. No, Matthias gripped the man's arm with bruising force. I will not lose her. Do you understand? Whatever must be done. We are doing everything medical science allows, the physician replied gently. Now it is in God's hands. Inside the sick room, Linnea had not left Cordelia's side for 3 days, snatching moments of sleep in the chair beside the bed, refusing all suggestions that she rest properly. Now she looked up as Matthias entered, her face pale with exhaustion, but determined. "The physicians have done what they can," he said, his voice hollow, Linea's jaw set in a stubborn line. "Then I shall do what they cannot." Before he could question her, she rose and went to the small trunk that contained her personal belongings. From it, she withdrew a pouch of dried herbs and a small bottle of amber liquid. "My mother was a healer in Marillo," she explained, moving to the fireplace where a kettle simmered. "These remedies have been passed through my family for generations. The physicians may not approve, but—" She met his gaze directly. "What have we to lose?" Matthias watched as she prepared a tea with careful measurements of the herbs, adding 3 precise drops of the amber liquid. The physicians would indeed object to such folk remedies, but he no longer cared for convention or propriety. Only Cordelia mattered. "What can I do?" he asked simply. Surprise flickered across Linea's features before she nodded. "Help me raise her. She must drink this while it's hot." Together they lifted Cordelia's limp form, Matthias cradling his daughter against his chest, while Linnea coaxed the liquid between her parched lips. When the cup was empty, they eased her back against the pillows. "Now we wait," Linnea said, "and we hope." Through the night they maintained their vigil, applying cool cloths to Cordelia's burning forehead, spooning broth and herbal tea into her mouth when possible, speaking softly to her even when she showed no sign of hearing. Somewhere in those dark hours, the formal distance between duke and servant dissolved entirely. They were simply 2 people fighting for a child they both loved. Dawn broke with Cordelia's fever still raging. Exhaustion overcame Linnea, who finally succumbed to sleep in her chair, her hand still clasping the child's. Matthias watched them both, terror and tenderness warring in his chest. "Please," he whispered, not knowing if he addressed God, Octavia's spirit, or the universe itself. "Please do not take her from me." In that moment, looking at Linnea's hand joined with his daughter's, Matthias confronted a truth he had been avoiding for months. He had broken his vow never to love again, not once, but twice. Cordelia's recovery, when it finally began, progressed with the same determination that characterized her nature. The fever broke on the 4th night, her small body drenched in sweat that Linnea gently sponged away while murmuring prayers of gratitude. By the week's end, she was sitting up in bed, weak but alert, the shadow of death retreating from her gray eyes. The royal physician declared it a miracle, though his sidelong glances at Linnea's herbal remedies suggested he suspected their role in the child's recovery. Matthias cared nothing for the man's professional pride. His daughter lived, and nothing else mattered. In the aftermath of crisis, Thornwick Manor settled into a new rhythm. Cordelia's convalescence required constant attention, which Linnea provided with unwavering dedication. Matthias found himself lingering in the sick room, initially to reassure himself of his daughter's improvement, but increasingly drawn by Linnea's presence. He observed her gentle efficiency, the way she balanced firmness with kindness, her ability to coax smiles from Cordelia, even on difficult days. In quiet moments, they spoke of books, of Marillo Village, of Cordelia's progress, conversations that gradually revealed Linnea's intelligence and depth of character. On a clear February afternoon, with Cordelia napping peacefully, Matthias suggested Linnea might benefit from fresh air. "You have scarcely left this room in weeks," he said. "A brief walk would restore your spirits." To his surprise, she agreed, and they found themselves strolling through the glass conservatory where Octavia had once tended exotic orchids. The plants had largely perished from neglect, but a few winter roses still bloomed in the sheltered warmth, their fragrance filling the humid air. "Lady Cordelia has your determination," Linnea said, breaking a comfortable silence. "She fought her way back with remarkable strength." "She has more of her mother in her than me," Matthias replied. "Octavia faced every challenge with grace I could never master." Linnea stopped beside a bloom of deep crimson, her fingers hovering above its petals without touching. "You do yourself a disservice, Your Grace. I have watched you these past months. Your love for your daughter is evident in everything you do." "Yet I failed her for 3 years," he admitted, the confession easier in this place of glass and filtered light. "I was so consumed by my own grief that I couldn't see hers." "Grief isn't something we simply overcome," Linnea said softly. "It's something we learn to carry. You carried yours, the only way you knew how. Matthias studied her profile, struck by the wisdom in one so young. How did you become so wise about loss, Miss Thorne? A sad smile touched her lips. My mother died when I was 12. My father retreated into silence much as Cordelia did. For years, I thought if I was perfect enough, quiet enough, he might return to me. She turned to face him directly. But what he needed wasn't my perfection. He needed permission to live again. To find joy without feeling he betrayed her memory. The words penetrated Matthias's defenses like an arrow finding its mark. He had demanded perfection from Cordelia, from himself, believing it a tribute to Octavia, when in fact it had been a prison for them both. And did he find joy again? Matthias asked, suddenly desperate to know. Yes, Linnea's eyes held his, in small ways at first, then larger ones. By the time he died, he could speak of my mother with smiles instead of tears. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing. Despite all barriers of rank and circumstance, Matthias found himself reaching for her hand, his fingers closing around hers with gentle pressure. Linnea, he said, her given name strange and wonderful on his lips. I find myself. The conservatory door burst open, admitting Lady Henrietta and her mother, the Countess of Westmoreland, accompanied by Finlay, whose expression conveyed both alarm and apology. Your Grace, he began. Lady Henrietta insisted, but the damage was done. The tableau before them, the Duke holding hands with a servant in intimate conversation, required no explanation. Lady Henrietta's face flushed with humiliation, while her mother's eyes narrowed with calculating displeasure. So this is why you rejected our suit, the Countess said coldly. For a serving girl. How the mighty Brenly has fallen. Linnea attempted to withdraw her hand, but Matthias held firm, something fierce and protective rising in his chest. Lady Westmoreland, he said with quiet authority. You forget yourself in my home. No, Your Grace, the Countess replied. It is you who have forgotten your position, your responsibilities, your very name. The Duke of Brenly dallying with a laundry maid. What would your ancestors say? As the conservatory filled with tension thick enough to cut, Matthias realized that in this moment of public discovery, he had made his choice. The only question remaining was whether he would have the courage to stand by it. The scandal erupted like wildfire through Brenly and beyond. Messengers galloped to and from Thornwick Manor, bearing letters of concern from distant relatives, outrage from the peerage, and thinly veiled curiosity from all quarters. Within the household itself, staff divided into factions, those who supported the unexpected romance, and those who considered it a disgrace to the Brenly name. Linnea bore the scrutiny with quiet dignity, though Matthias saw the toll it took in the shadows beneath her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. She had offered to leave, to remove herself from the equation for the sake of his position and Cordelia's future. He had refused with a vehemence that surprised them both. I lost 3 years to grief and convention, he told her as they walked the perimeter of the frozen lake, far from prying eyes. I will not lose whatever time we might have to fear of gossip. Lady Henrietta had departed in high dudgeon, but not before delivering an ultimatum. Either Matthias send Linnea away and reconsider her suit, or she would ensure the Brenly name became synonymous with scandal throughout the kingdom. The Duke's counsel was scarcely more supportive. Lord Pembroke spoke for them all when he presented the case against what he delicately termed this unfortunate attachment. The alliance with Westmoreland would have brought significant advantages, he reminded Matthias. Lady Henrietta's dowry alone would have restored the East Wing and improved the tenant farms and her connections at court. I am well aware of what I am sacrificing, Matthias interrupted. The question is whether it is worth the price. It was Cordelia who settled the matter in her forthright, 6-year-old way. Fully recovered from her illness, she burst into the council meeting where the men were debating her father's future, her governess in breathless pursuit. You cannot send Linnea away, she announced, marching directly to her father's chair. She saved my life, and she makes you smile again. The council members shifted uncomfortably as Cordelia continued, her voice clear and determined. Mother would want you to be happy. She told me so before she went to heaven, she said. Always remember, love is the greatest treasure. Linnea is our treasure now. Out of the mouths of babes, Matthias thought, looking at his daughter's earnest face. In that moment, she was so like Octavia, the same unwavering conviction when principles were at stake, the same courage in the face of opposition. That evening, as snow began to fall again, Matthias led Linnea to the conservatory, where winter roses still bloomed against all odds. He had dismissed the servants, lighting the lamps himself, creating a private haven amidst the glass and greenery. "The council believes I have taken leave of my senses," he said, watching snowflakes melt against the glass ceiling. "Perhaps they are right." Linnea touched a rose blossom gently. "What do you believe, your grace?" "Matthias," he corrected. "I believe that life offered me a second chance at happiness when you mended my daughter's doll. I was too blind to recognize it then, too bound by my own vow never to love again." He took her hands in his. "But I see clearly now." From his pocket he withdrew a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. Not the Brenly diamond that had adorned Octavia's hand and now rested in the family vault for Cordelia's future, but a new ring, commissioned secretly from the village jeweler. "This isn't the conventional path," he acknowledged. "There will be those who never accept you as Duchess of Brenly. Our children, should we be so blessed, will face questioning about their mother's origins. The court may shun us, at least initially." "I have never sought position or title," Linnea replied softly. "Only to be where I might do the most good, and to follow my heart when it finally spoke clearly." "And what does your heart say now?" Matthias asked, the ring poised between them. Linnea's smile bloomed like the winter roses around them, against all odds, beautiful in its defiance of convention and season. "That some distances exist only because we choose to maintain them. And I choose to cross this one, if you'll have me." As their lips met in a kiss that promised healing for them both, snow continued to fall on Thornwick Manor, no longer a mausoleum to grief, but a sanctuary for a family reborn through love that defied all boundaries.